Hi, I'm Jordan, and I'm going to run through a quick needs analysis and the planning for a strength session for someone who takes part in basketball. Okay, so in regards to the session, the things that I've considered are the client's age, as the participant is 46 years old, their experience. Now, my participant is a highly experienced sports coach and is an experienced personal trainer who's worked with a variety of sports people and clientele. He has some experience in strength and conditioning, but not recently. So I've took that into consideration in terms of the planning side and what they're capable of. Okay. Now, from that point of view, this participant is fairly well known or well informed with the exercises that were completed, as they've performed them in the past and they've taught them to clients in the past. So that wasn't really an issue. But in regards to that, that was their experience. In terms of sport that my client picked, they are a basketball player. They've competed competitively in the past and now getting back into training, competing at a lower level, which did influence some of the choices that I made in terms of the planning of the session and what my client needs from a strength point of view and power point of view. So in terms of the type of session that was ran, it was a little bit more plyometric than it was your typical resistance training session, but we'll get into that a little bit. In terms of a periodization cycle, they're kind of transitioning now out of that general preparatory phase and into that specific preparatory phase, and we'll see what I mean by that in a little bit. Okay, so in terms of the needs for strength and power, upper body strength, lower body strength, and explosive power are all things that will be used in basketball. And as a result, I've just put a couple of considerations in that I'll talk around. Okay, so for upper body strength, it's necessary for maintaining position against defenders when shooting, when passing, with precision under a lot of pressure. But even though it's a non-contact sport, the likelihood is there's some kind of physicality, or you're put into an odd position where generating a lot of power or force can be a bit of an issue from that point of view. So that's being considered. But in terms of the session, it has been more focused on lower body strength and power development rather than upper body, as we'll do that in a separate session. Okay, but in terms of that upper body strength, there are the reasons for including that into a training program for a basketball player. And in regards to lower body, essential for explosive movements, including jumping, sprinting, and quick changes of direction. So from the fundamental point of view, is a ground sport. A lot of it is to do with how can you beat a opposing player through either aerial duels, whether it's through speed in the sprints, or even the quick changes of direction that you may use to try and get away from a defender, or an offensive player. So in regards to that lower body strength, that's where that'll come into it, and those explosive movements are linked right into that power development and that portion of plyometrics that we'll be using. Okay, so in terms of that power, it's critical for quick takeoffs, jumping for rebounds, and rapid changes in pace or direction. So that's where that rate of force development comes into it, the amount of torque that they can produce. Okay, it's being able to get off the mark as quick as possible with as much force as possible. So increased contractile speed and increased velocity, increase in force that can be produced in that short period of time. So in that 0.1 to 0.2 second range, compared to the larger range for strength development that we might see in different movements. And that's some of the things that were considered into it. And in a sport that's like basketball, where there's a large emphasis on reacting to a loose ball, for example, where that will come and happen, or the quick changes in pace, is an end-to-end type of sport. It's constant, and there's a lot of explosiveness that's used within a short period of time. So it's developing kind of a little bit of conditioning towards that, but it's more strength focused. Okay, so in terms of the warm-up, I followed mobility pulse raiser, followed by stretches, that kind of routine. Standard, it's industry practice. So in terms of mobility, I've done a little bit more full body, as some of the exercises that we are using are plyometric, which do use the full body. In terms of the arms are involved in lower body explosive movements. They do play a role in building momentum to lift the body up. So that's the reason why I've included them, and it's not necessarily lower body focused. There is an element of upper body that's used in those explosive movements. Okay, so in terms of those mobility exercises, 20 seconds on each of them. So we had shoulder rolls, arm circles, trunk rotations, open close gates, and ankle rolls. That basically opens up the entire body, makes us more mobile, and it preps them for a session. In terms of the pulse raiser, pick the bike. Because the session is lower body focused, I thought that would be the best way to warm them up with the pulse raiser. Now, other options would have been the treadmill, which would have been a little bit more specific to the type of sport that they'd be doing. But I thought with it being bike, it'll be a lot more easier to transition into the main session. And it's also entirely focused on the lower body, and it helps open up those hips, helps move those joints that are going to be used, and help improve synovial fluid into those joints, allowing them to be a lot more mobile, and also to reduce injuries from happening. In terms of the time that I want them to be on that bike for, roughly 3 to 5 minutes. We'll take judgments from how well they're performing in the warm-up in terms of fatigue that might be setting in, just getting that pulse up. And in terms of heart rate, didn't have a heart rate monitor with us, so it would have been somewhere between 104 and 121 for my client, with them being 46 years old. It's obviously going to be a little bit lower, but in terms of an RPE, roughly around 12 to 14, 12 to 15 range would have been fine. It's not too easy, and it's also not too difficult. And just to confirm, it is the Borg scale that we're using for RPE, and it's the standard scale, not the modified 1 to 10 version. In terms of stretches, we've got chest and shoulder openers to help open up those shoulders, helps stretch out the pecs and part of the shoulders, the deltoids. Okay, move down into the lunge and twist, or a lunge and back extension as an alternative for if my client felt a little bit uncomfortable doing the twist. Really important because it helps warm up not only the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes. Okay, the trunk is also able to get involved into that, making a really good warm-up stretch to use. It's nice and dynamic, which is really beneficial for strength and explosive power training, as it can improve rate of force development. It can improve explosiveness and strength generation. Okay, now moving on, we've got some ground sweeps for the hamstrings, some kneeling lunges to help open up that hip and also to stretch out those quads a lot better, and then moving into those walking calf raises to help warm up those calves. Okay, just before moving on, just to reiterate, it is a low body strength and power development session. That's the entire focus for it. So that's why the warm-up is a little bit more specific to the lower body, and so is the cool down and the main session. Now, in terms of the main session, exercises that I've picked: jump squats, split squats, lateral plyometric jumps, depth jumps, and Romanian deadlift. Now, for the jump squats and through to the depth jumps, I've kept them body weight, just for the time, and gave my client the option to adjust the weight if they felt a little bit comfortable to do that. And the only reason why I've done that, typically I would be a little bit more didactic and be more onto that, but because my client is a little bit older, he's not done physical activity or that type of training for a little while, and he's been sticking to more fitness or general fitness rather than strength and conditioning. I just want to ease him in through body weight before moving on to more weighted exercises. So you can see in the jump squats, 3 to 4 sets of 6 reps using body weight, 60 to 90 seconds rest. That should be more than enough time to recover from that type of workload. It's not that intense. Jump squats or some of the lower intensity exercises that you can use for plyometrics. So 60 to 90 seconds would be fine for that. And the whole idea behind that is that's literally stimulating some of the movements that you'll see for a basketball player. That vertical jump produced by those jump squats, that counter movement jump, is really important for that. And even though it's lower intensity, it's specific to the sport, which is more beneficial for development. Now, split squats, I'll put them in so that we can target individual muscle groups for different sides of the body. Okay, so having that 4 sets of 5 reps for each leg, body weight, 60, 90 seconds rest for each set. And then after speaking with the client during the session, we've upped that weight from body weight, and we included 3 kilogram dumbbells, so each side, to increase the intensity as they felt comfortable to do so, and fatigue wasn't too bad at the time. And that'll help improve that single leg jumping ability, that explosiveness from one leg to the other. Really good for agility, really good for performing specific skills like the layup, where they'll be leaving the ground on one leg rather than using both legs to produce that power. So it's really specific to that type of movement, and for the type of position or play style that my participant uses, it is a lot more layup based in terms of that. He likes getting through the defense and getting into that open space, and he performs layup really well. So having that type of training exercise put into the session is really beneficial for them to make sure that they get the edge on opposing players. Lateral plyometric jumps, I've picked them because it allows them to keep the center of gravity low and helps improve stabilization and agility, and that's all really beneficial for changing direction, which is really important in basketball, fast-paced game. You've got really agile players typically who play it. My client isn't on the taller side, he's a little bit shorter, so his center of gravity is already a little bit low, which makes him really agile already, but it's just taking that extra approach to agility that'll take his game to the next level, which I think will be really beneficial for him. And we try to focus on minimal ground time, so contact time with the ground, try and keep that to the lowest point as possible, so that we are focusing entirely on that explosiveness. So that transition phase from the eccentric to the concentric, pushing away from the ground, that's what we want to be working towards, and make sure that we're getting that on lock, because that'll be really beneficial for the agility, changing direction quickly. In terms of depth jumps, 3 sets of 5 reps, body weight again, 60 to 90 seconds. We started off on the lower height plyo box, and on set 2 we agreed to move up to a higher weight. So out of the 3 heights, he was on the middle height, and again we focus on minimal ground time, so ensuring that we're getting as little time as possible on the ground, emphasising that explosiveness, that reactive explosive power that we get from landing. And it's just to develop that rate of force development rather than your typical power. Okay, so in regards to that, that's the plyometric section in a nutshell. We moved then on to Romanian deadlift, or an RDL, 4 sets of 6 reps. Kept that at a lower weight at 60 kilograms. Okay, that's roughly about 40 or 50% of their 1 repetition max, and we give them a 2-minute rest time in between. Now, even though the weight is a little bit lower for them in terms of that explosiveness, or what we would consider typical for strength training, even though it's a little bit lower, it needed to be lower so that we could focus on the eccentric phase and that we could focus on that explosive hip drive that would really benefit those sprints, vertical jump. Okay, it'll put that into a nutshell. It's really beneficial. Okay, so in terms of keeping that weight low, it allows him to develop as much drive as possible in the hips and as quick as possible. So like I said before, that RFD, so that ability to generate force in an instant, in a short period of time, in the first tenths of a second, really important for basketball, especially if you're doing things like vertical jump. Getting up quick and high is really beneficial for that. And then moving on to the cool down, very basic, bike for 3 to 5 minutes, RPE around 15 to 18 from the start, and then we're going to just reduce that over time from those 3 to 5 minutes, and we'll just reduce that to a stop over time. That helps just lower the pulse and get him ready for the static stretches that are going to follow. Now, in terms of the static stretches, because we are more lower body focused for this session, it will be more lower body muscle groups that are being stretched. Very little emphasis on the upper body, as that wasn't our target for this session. And I've just outlined what stretches are done for maintenance and what ones we done for developmental. The gastrocnemius, we use that as the wall assisted just to make it easier, and it means then that my client could actually put a little bit more force, or not force, but a little bit extra stretch into the gastrocnemius muscle to enable for a lot better recovery, breaking down that lactic acid that might build up in those calves from those biometric movements. A side lunge for the adductors. I've done that again as another maintenance, as the client didn't really say that adductors were tight or anything like that, or any actions to do with those adductors were an issue. Hamstrings really important. We use those eccentric motions on the Romanian deadlift, which entirely focuses on the hamstrings, and that posterior chain is really going to suffer from that eccentric phase, and we up that from the standard 2 seconds to 3 to 4 seconds, really emphasizing that eccentric phase. So my client's probably going to feel that in the morning, or within at least 48 hours. But we kept that as a maintenance just because he never felt like there was any issues in terms of his hamstrings, and that was fine. Moving on to the final stretch, we've done some kneeling lunges, and we've done that with a raised foot just to make sure that we emphasize that quad and make sure that it's really stretched out, and it's in that lengthened position, and that'll help open up the hips also. So those hip flexors will also get hit with that, and it's really nice type of stretch that we can use for that. Now, instead of a maintenance stretch, we use developmental for that, and the reasons behind that are essentially because my client had notified me in the past, prior to the session, that he does have tight quads, which does make those types of movements that require that those quads to take charge and make those issues kind of emphasized because they were tight. Now, I use developmental just to help open up that hip and also stretch those muscles, so that rectus femoris that crosses over that hip joint, that could be stretched quite well. And then the other isolated muscles that are on the femur crossing over to the knee and not the hip, those muscles were also targeted a bit. But having that foot raised and behind the body, really beneficial to open up those quads and make them really flexible, increasing that elasticity. Thank you.